Thursday night edition, Aaron Torres Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Torres. Hope everybody's doing well. Hope everybody is having a great day. And hope everybody is okay with a little bit of lying and deceit from your boy Torres. Here is why. It is because, listen, I said last night, I said on whatever night it was Wednesday night after the first round of the NBA draft. I said, we're not going to do a Thursday show because the presidential debate is going to be on. I know there are things bigger than sports in life. And so I just felt like we probably won't do a show because is there going to be that much to talk about from the second round of the 2024 NBA draft? Well, as it turns out, the draft started at about 4 p.m. Eastern time. And I solely bring it up because it feels like people are fired up as Bronny James is officially a member of the Los Angeles Lakers. People are mad. People are angry. People want to talk about it. And so I figure let's just go ahead and do a quick kind of rapid reaction show. I don't think this is going to turn into a 45-minute or 1-hour presentation, but let's just talk a little bit about the NBA draft and everything that happened in round two. Before we get started, by the way, a couple quick things. One, first of all, if you missed the first round reaction, that was on Wednesday night, make sure to go back and check that out. Also, on top of that, make sure to subscribe to the Aaron Torres Pod, the Aaron Torres Pod YouTube. It's been kind of a crazy week with the Jim Schlossnagle news. Obviously, the reaction to the NBA draft. We're doing our live reaction now. So everybody make sure you're subscribed and everybody make sure you're paying attention. By the way, should mention that we won't just be talking Bronny James. We'll be talking some of the other big stories from Thursday as well. But as I said, felt like there was time for a quick little bonus reaction. It feels like people are fired up. So with that said, let's not waste any more time. Let's get to the topic of the day. And the topic of the day, listen, like I said, was not planning on going live here on a Thursday afternoon of the Aaron Torres Pod. Just felt like, listen, everybody's got stuff going on. It's June. There's not that much to really discuss. But the second round of the NBA draft was on Thursday. It was the first year that they decided to split things up. And by the way, before we get to even Bronny, let me start by saying this. So I don't know that I hate splitting up the first round and the second round. And I understand that this year was a little bit different because they scheduled this draft having no idea there'd be a presidential debate in June. So they moved things up to 4 p.m. Eastern because, first of all, I saw a lot of people kind of saying, why are they doing it at 4 p.m.? It's because there's a presidential debate. They don't want to get crushed in the ratings. But at the same time, let me say this. If we all agree, by the way, my lighting here is falling down. Forgive me if you're watching on YouTube. This was a quick, rapid reaction show. Was not really planning on doing this. Anyway, so let me say this, is that understand the presidential debate was on. That's why they decided to do it at 4 Eastern, okay? I get it. It's not ideal. It's not this. It's not that. At the same time, can I say something else? If ESPN is going to commit to broadcasting the NBA draft in general, let alone the second day, can I just make one simple request? Can you actually have people on air who actually know what they're talking about and actually care? Because let me tell you this, I haven't seen a mail-in performance like the second day of the NBA draft since I don't even know when, okay? So the bottom line is this. Listen, I know nothing's perfect. I know it's hard to put together whatever, but you even go back to the first round of the NBA draft. They had the simulcast on ABC, ESPN. I don't think outside of Jay Billis, anyone knew anything about any of these guys, okay? Listen, I'm not trying to be offensive, but Bob Myers knows nothing. I know he's a former GM, but he ain't a GM now. He clearly hadn't scouted anybody. Stephen A. Smith could not have been more checked out. It was clear he did no research, no homework on any of these guys, contributed nothing. I have never seen, frankly, Stephen A. on a set in which he not only looked like he didn't want to be there, he didn't have something to say. He had nothing to say the entire time. It was a debacle. Listen, I know he's spread thin. First Take, NBA Countdown, whatever. He's not qualified to be on that desk. Another thing, let me just say this. Andrea Carter, Monica McNutt, I think they do a great job on the WNBA. If you want to bring them on to talk NBA, that's fine. But they are two more. They're spread too thin. They're doing too much. Andrea Carter had nothing to contribute on Thursday night. I'm sorry if that offends people, but it's the truth. And then you get to Wednesday night, they had nothing to contribute. Then you get to Thursday, and that desk was a joke. Listen, I give Malika Andrews credit because she was trying to hold it together. Bob Myers knows nothing. Stephen A. Smith doesn't want to be there. Woj is just there to break news. He's not an analyst. Gavoni is in some other room somewhere else. It was one of the most poorly put together productions that I have ever seen. And I think the thing that frustrates me even more is that ESPN has a million guys and girls on their payroll that actually know these players, that actually care about college basketball, that actually know the stories of these players, and they're all sitting on the sidelines. ESPN has a great group of college basketball analysts. At least Billis was there on Wednesday. I keep getting my days confused because who has the first day of a draft on a Wednesday? But at least Billis was there day one. I don't even love Billis. But on Thursday, what were we doing? And beyond that, it's not like you don't have the talent on your roster to get this production moving in the right direction. Jimmy Dykes is incredible. Knows the SEC, knows college basketball, loves this sport, loves the stories, loves the people, has known these kids in many cases since they were 16, 17 years old. Fran Fraschilla, he was on this show. He talked about the stories. That's how they built the entire Big 12. Knowing these players, knowing these families, going through the experience with them of 2, 3, 4 years in college basketball. By the way, Sean Farnham, Corey Alexander, there are a lot of great college basketball analysts that would have been so good on this broadcast that would have contributed something, would have contributed anything. And instead, it was just an embarrassment. And so that's my first big takeaway. I know many of you want to talk Bronny. We will get to Bronny momentarily. But can I just start by saying, if we are going to do the 2-day NBA draft going forward, can we please have people on set that actually care? Because that was just a straight up embarrassment. And I don't know what else there is to say about it other than that. And it was just really, really, really bad. By the way, we have some major lighting problems here in the Aaron Torres pod studio, but we're rolling through. So had to get that off my chest. Got a little itch here on my thing too. Not my thing, my ankle. Okay. But with that said, let's also get to let's switch gears off ESPN because that was an embarrassment. That was an abomination. And let's get to the real story. Let's get to why so many of you came here. It is because I'll be honest. I thought it was just a foregone understanding and a foregone conclusion that Bronny James was going 55th overall to the Los Angeles Lakers. And I bring it up because why I bring it up is because, in my opinion, this was not a surprising piece of news. That's why I didn't think I was even going to do a show. But then to see the reaction of so many people when Bronny was actually drafted, maybe I'm naive. Maybe it's because I live this every single day. But sometimes, very rarely, I'm stunned. But I'm very rarely, let me put it this way. I am very rarely stunned by the reaction to certain things in sports. Like, I just think that, at a certain point, you do this long enough, you kind of know what people are going to say and how people are going to react. And so I bring it up because I was legitimately stunned with the reaction to Bronny James and the decision by the Los Angeles Lakers to draft him at 55 overall. Again, it felt like this was known for a while. And so let's get in. I told you we'd have an honest conversation. So let's go ahead and have a quick, honest conversation about Bronny, okay? So let me start by saying this. Couple things. First of all, I got to do the caveat. By all accounts, everybody who has ever met him loves him, thinks the world of him. I know a lot of the guys on the old USC staff, Andy Enfield, Eric Mobley was an assistant coach there. That's Evan Mobley's dad, Chris Kapko, etc. That staff adored Bronny. Said he was a great kid, great to be around, great teammate, great person, all that. So let's get that caveat out of the way. But let me say with the Bronny stuff, I always say it on this show. Sometimes in life, two things can be true. And when it comes to Bronny, I don't think that I actually have a major hot take because I see it from one side, but I certainly see it from the other as well. And I can't get fired up and I can't get super mad that the Los Angeles Lakers used the 55th pick in the draft on this kid for a simple reason. We all knew it was coming. And the bottom line is, as much as we can criticize LeBron, and I'm going to get to that in a minute, at the end of the day, listen, I'm not a parent, but I know the goal of any parent is to do whatever you can to help your child succeed in life, whether it's in school, a vocation, whatever their interests are, you're going to support them, right? As long as it's obviously positive. If they love computers, you send them to computer camp. If they love to ride horses and you can afford it, you give them lessons, give them swim lessons, send them to the best colleges you can. Heck, what did we have about 3 or 4 years ago? We had the USC admission scandal. We had Aunt Becky basically paying her way behind the scenes in to get her kid into USC when the kid clearly wasn't able to do it themselves. So I don't really fundamentally have a problem with Bronny being selected because LeBron ultimately, he's going to do everything he can to help support his son. And so it's hard for me to get like mad about it because, again, for the fourth time, I know I've said it a million times, we all knew it was coming, but a parent's always going to do what they can. And a parent that has power and control is certainly going to do whatever they can in a situation like this. I always say, and I've said this on the show before, in life, everybody talks about all this privilege. Oh, this privilege, that privilege, blah, blah, blah. The only privilege in life, in my opinion, that really matters is green privilege. And what I mean by that is if you got the money to pull stuff off and it's legal, you're going to do it, right? I mean, again, we talked about Aunt Becky. We talked about whatever. I don't mean to go down a crazy rabbit hole here, but O.J. Simpson probably got off with some major crimes because he had the money, the green, to pay the best lawyers that he could. So LeBron and Bronny, there's some green privilege involved. LeBron is one of the richest men in the world, one of the most powerful people, probably the most powerful person in the NBA. He pulled it off. At the same time, though, I did have a few problems with the presentation of it and the analysis of it, and this is where I want to get honest. Don't blame LeBron. Don't blame Rich Paul for pushing it. Don't blame Bronny. Bronny's just a bystander in this chess game that his dad is playing. But there were a couple things that did kind of annoy me about the presentation. First of all, from ESPN's perspective, and again, I say this as somebody who was actually watching a little bit of the broadcast, can we stop trying to sell Bronny as like a legitimate prospect? Because on the broadcast, two funny things happened. First of all, there was a clip that went crazy viral of Woj being like, stop talking about nepotism. This isn't nepotism. And even if it was, the best owners in this league, front office people in this league, coaches, there's nepotism all over this league. Okay, that's fine, Woj. I wouldn't argue with you. Here's the thing, though. There is still nepotism. You just acknowledged it. You just acknowledged there's nepotism. You just acknowledged that the only reason that Bronny got drafted was because of who his father is. And so that's funny. Beyond that, I also found this funny. I found it funny that ESPN was trying to sell us so hard. No, he's a legitimate prospect. He's 6'1" and his wingspan is this and his vertical leap is that. And he's not a legitimate prospect. Not at this point in his career. If his name was Mike Smith or Aaron Torres or whatever, and he had no affiliation with LeBron James, he would not have been drafted. Bluntly, he probably wouldn't have even ended up at USC last year. He was like a top 30, 40 prospect, largely on his name alone. By the way, I'll say what I said all along. He was never a top 10 prospect in this draft class. You know, the Gavoni guy on ESPN, listen, I try not to criticize other people in the media unless I think they're disingenuous. That dude, let me just say, I don't know where he ends and where clutch begins because he's got his head so far up Rich Paul's you-know-what that I don't even know where it all begins and ends. And so I just sit there and say, like, we can have an honest conversation about Bronny. Good kid. It's not his choice. He's just trying to have a career. But ESPN, can you stop selling me on how great he is? Just say what it is. Listen, he's LeBron's son. It happens. There's nepotism. It's okay. But then don't say, well, this isn't really nepotism, because it is. beyond that, there's something else that I actually haven't heard anybody else talk about, which feels like an important part of the conversation, which is this, which is what is like right now, what is the end game for LeBron? Because it feels like it's still sort of about winning, but it's kind of about winning on his terms, right? Because here's the thing that I was thinking. There is still a scenario where you can use that 55th pick. There were players at 55 that were available. Because remember, LeBron James is going to be 40 years old. He's 39 right now. He'll be 40 in December. And so his window to win at the highest level is next year, maybe the year after, but probably next year. And so there are players at 55 that can help you win right now. We'll get to some of the guys that weren't drafted or got drafted late, whatever. Keyshawn Johnson from Arizona can step in, athletically defend, play hard, rebound, do whatever. That's a dude that was available at 55 that tomorrow could step on an NBA court and be fine. Kevin McCullough, who was drafted a pick or two behind Bronny James from Kansas, is a player that could step on an NBA floor and contribute next year. There are others. But the bottom line to me, when I look at this, what is it about for LeBron? Is it actually about winning, or is it about winning on your terms? I think about this all the time. And I do think as you get older, I think you get more stubborn in your ways. You get less willing to compromise. You get less willing to, do things differently. And I think that's what we're seeing with LeBron. LeBron, what we're seeing right now is a guy that, yeah, he says he's willing to win, but is he really willing to win, or is he only willing to win under his circumstances? With the coach he wants, drafting his son, with the teammates that he wants, because again, there were players available. And so what I think about with LeBron, you could have still signed your son. By the way, it wasn't like he was a first-round pick and he gets to go up and shake the commissioner's hand. He was sitting at home like everybody else. So, I guess the moment's cool, but if your son knows he hasn't earned it, if there's no big payoff other than your name being on a Wikipedia page, I don't get what is so exciting about that and so appealing for LeBron. You can still have your son sign as a free agent. You can still have him come to training camp, still have him play in the summer league, still figure out a way to get him on the roster at some point so you can play with him. But this idea that you had to use the 55th pick, I don't get it. And let me wrap on the LeBron Bronny stuff by saying this. We don't talk a ton of NBA here, whatever. Not my wheelhouse, right? But at the same time, I do have something that I've been wanting to get off my chest that I don't think a lot of people fully realize, okay? And that's that. And I do think we saw a little bit of this in some people's responses after Bronny was picked. And that's this. I don't think people realize just how much LeBron has killed the Lakers brand in Los Angeles. Okay. So I live in Los Angeles. I moved here in 2012. Why that timing is interesting. That was the back end of Kobe's prime. The first year I moved here was the last year that Kobe made the playoffs before he had all those injuries and he ultimately retired. But when I moved here, the Lakers were the biggest thing in town. Bigger than the Dodgers, bigger than USC football. There was no NFL football. And so I solely bring it up to say that the Lakers were huge. That was the tail end of Lamar Odom. The Kardashians were there. Jack Nicholson was still showing up. And I get that things change. But I can tell you right now, the number of Lakers fans that don't like the Lakers anymore because of LeBron and because of what he's done to this organization, I can't even contextualize it for you. I'm here to tell you, first of all, I could give you a million examples, but LeBron has hijacked this franchise like he has everywhere else, and that might work in Cleveland. It doesn't work in Los Angeles. And so I have a buddy who listens to this show. He'll be listening on Thursday night or Friday morning or whatever. He told me, I'm a Lakers fan in hiding. I'm a Lakers fan in, I think he uses the term in remission or something like that. In other words, I'm not rooting for the Lakers until LeBron is gone. I have so many fans. A buddy of mine, my old next door neighbor, used to be a diehard fan, loved Kobe, favorite athlete, used to watch every game with his dad. They don't watch the Lakers anymore. My wife grew up on Shaq and Kobe in LA. She and her family don't watch the Lakers anymore. And it's not just my opinion. The facts back it up. You know, the Lakers, in terms of local TV ratings, were like 17th in the NBA this year. And the Lakers weren't even terrible. But the thing about LA, people think LA, there's a certain image of LA that I can tell you is not true. I think everyone thinks it's all, glitz and glamour and Hollywood and this and that. I've lived in LA for 10 years. I always say LA is a much more hardworking town than people realize. Yes, there is a Will Smith that makes $20 million for a Bad Boys 7 or whatever he just put out. But guess what? There's also a makeup girl that's making $40K a year that's got to show up on set at 2 a.m. just like he did. There's cameramen, there's camera operators that are just trying to get by. LA is a very hardworking town, and that's why I think they've always kind of rallied around people like Kobe Bryant. You can like Kobe Bryant, you can hate Kobe Bryant. Kobe Bryant woke up at 4 a.m. every day to get his first workout in because he wanted to work out while everybody else was sleeping. Kobe was a guy that was all about basketball all the time. There were no off-the-court things. I know he had a situation early in his career. I'm not trying to diminish that. But as he got older, it was all about basketball, all about the Lakers, all about family. That's all he cared about. Jerry West, who just passed away, all about basketball junkie, diehard. And LeBron is not that. LeBron is about basketball, sort of, but also kind of wants to have a hand in the entertainment business, and he wants to pick the coach, and he wants to pick his teammates, and he wants to make draft picks. I'm just here to tell you, LeBron has killed the Lakers brand, and there are so many people in this city. They've just tuned out the Lakers until he's gone. And so I know it sounds crazy, but I think there's something to it. And I will say, I think the last month has largely exposed the Lakers. They had that embarrassing search with Dan Hurley. Was Dan Hurley ever a candidate? That's another conversation for another day. But they whiff on him. They hire LeBron's buddy. They draft LeBron's son. It is, whatever the right word to say, chaos, but it's embarrassing. This formerly great organization is just a complete dumpster fire. All right, so what we're going to do. We're going to take a quick break. I do see some questions rolling in. If you have any questions, drop them in. What we are going to do, like I said, take a quick break. We're going to come back. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit about some of the other big news and notes from the 2024 NBA draft, some of my favorite picks, some of the biggest misses. Quick break. Be right back. Before we do, many of you ask me all the time, Torres, what can I do to help support the show? You give me hours and hours and hours of content every single week. What can I do to help you? Well, I'll tell you what, do me a quick favor. Check out the Aaron Torres Media merchandise store for all of your team-specific shirts, hats, and more, all available at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. A lot of you wondering, Torres, what can I get in that merch store? Well, first of all, we got our brand new Hope and Pope Kentucky basketball t-shirts. That's right. Mark Pope has arrived. He is here to save the day. Get your Hope and Pope t-shirts there. Also, Arkansas fans, the Big Pig Invasion is here. You can get your tees there. Basketball School Alabama shirts. Mora Hurley 2024 UConn shirts for your tailgates at Rentschler Field, your games at the XL Center or Gamble. And oh, by the way, your Mike effing Woodson gear for Indiana. If you love football, we got you covered too. We got more Dion shirts and hats than we even know what to do with. The freeze warning has hit the plains. Auburn fans, grab your freeze warning tees now. And of course, our new era, new rules shirt applies to Nebraska football and its incredible fan base. We have more coming for the fall, plenty in stock right now. So make sure to check out the Aaron Torres Media merch store at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. And you can always hit me up with any questions. Aaron Torres Podcast Questions @gmail.com. All right, everybody. I am back. Good to be back. So what I want to do now, go ahead and get to some of the other storylines. Day 2 NBA draft. If you missed our day 1 coverage, we talked a lot on Wednesday night into Thursday. Available on the YouTube channel, available on the podcast feed. Lot to dive into from last night, which we already hit, but let's go ahead and get to some of the other news and notes from whatever today is, Thursday in the second round of the NBA draft. First off, let me go ahead and give a couple picks that I did like from the second round. By the way, I gave you 4 picks and 4 guys in the second round that I said I think are just can't miss guys that are going to be awesome, awesome players. 2 ended up getting drafted, 2 didn't. So we'll discuss that in a minute. But among the picks that I liked, the first one that immediately comes to mind, I love Jamal Shed, 45th pick overall. He does go to Jamal Shed goes to the Sacramento Kings at 45. Jamal Shed is a rock star. Okay. He played at Houston. For people who do not know, leading scorer, All-American. And listen, there are guys, I don't care if they're an inch too small. I don't care if they're whatever. If you can ball, you can ball. If you got guts and you got heart and you got determination, you are a dude that is going to play in the NBA and going to find a spot. And so it's funny because when I did the Wednesday night reaction, I'll be honest, I kind of just assumed that he actually got drafted in the first round. So I didn't mention him as a second round guy that I was keeping my eye on. But anyway, Jamal Shed does get drafted. Toronto Raptors, 13 points per game this year, 4 rebounds, 6.5 assists. But more than anything, tough, leader, awesome. Love the pick for the Toronto Raptors. I think this dude's going to play in the league for a long time. Speaking of guys that I think are going to play in the league for a long time, a guy that I have mentioned quite a bit here over the last couple weeks, a player that was selected just a few spots right around the Jamal Shed pick, just a few spots after Jamal Shed, Kentucky's Antonio Reeves. Listen, we talked about Antonio Reeves on Wednesday night show. I love everything about him. First of all, kind of a wild story with Antonio Reeves, a kid that declared for the NBA draft last year, was looking for any level of promise that he could possibly get because he did not want to come back to college. Well, he comes back, gets his degree. He ends up turning into an All-American caliber player, averages 20 points a game, 44% three-point shooting. And this is a kid that I believe is going to stay in the NBA for a long time. He gets drafted, by the way, by the Orlando Magic, but I believe he was ultimately traded to New Orleans. But I bring it up to very simply say, this is a kid that is going to have opportunities in the NBA. And if you can shoot the 3 ball the way that he does, there's always going to be a spot for you. Listen, the NBA, you can like it, you can hate it, whatever. This era is never going away. There's never going to be an era, despite what maybe because of what my buddy JJ Redick likes to say. It's a math equation, F-head, not happening. And what I mean by that is that we're not going back to an era of Karl Malone banging bodies in the post with Charles Oakley. We're not going back to a lot of 86 to 80 games. Scoring, three-point shooting, spacing, those are things that are always going to be a priority. And because of it, I think Antonio Reeves is going to have a long career. So credit to him, a guy that was just begging to get drafted last year, decides to come back. First, he wants to transfer. He ends up at Kentucky, turns into an All-American, the 47th pick overall. I guess we're just going, we're like Noah's Ark. We're going 2 by 2 here. We went from 45 to 47, now to 49. This was my favorite sleeper in the draft, and we talked about him with Fran Fraschilla. UConn's Tristan Newton, okay? So we talked a little bit about Tristan Newton on Wednesday night show. Listen, I'm not an NBA draft evaluator, okay? I just don't understand how you can argue that this kid is not an NBA player. Tell me what you're looking for in an NBA guard that this kid does not have. First of all, he has positional size, 6'5", can play on the ball, can play off the ball. This year averaged 16 points per game, 6 assists, 6.5 rebounds. By the way, shot about 33% from 3. So you'd like to see the 3-point shot a little bit better, but all you had to do was watch UConn. The kid was basically the best player on the floor in virtually every game that he played this year. He went to Fog Allen Fieldhouse and was the best player on the court. On a night where everybody else struggled for UConn, Tristan Newton had 31 points in one of the few losses this year for the Huskies. That was against the Kansas Jayhawks, okay? 25 against Villanova, 22 in a blowout win against Xavier, 27 at Creighton in that loss where, again, nobody else showed up, 25 against St. John's in the Big East tournament, 20 against Northwestern in the NCAA tournament, 20 in the national championship game. But how about this? 20 points, 5 rebounds, 7 assists in that national championship game after having 12, 3, and 9 assists against Alabama. And so I could go on, but this is a kid. You know, we talked about this with Fran Fraschilla, but what Fran said, and I liked the way he described it. He said Tristan Newton is going to be a guy that is impossible to cut. Totally agree with that. Tristan Newton is going to be a very, very good NBA player for a very long time. By the way, in the chat, I see some questions about Justin Edwards. We are going to get to that in a minute, I promise. Okay, just a couple other picks that I did like. You know, I'll say this. Johnny Furphy, the kid out of Kansas. So I didn't think he struck me as an obvious first-round talent. I actually thought he should come back. He had a very unique story. Blew up really around this time last year. Basically, at this time last year, had one Division I offer for Sacramento State. He's from Australia originally. Blows up over the summer, decides to reclassify, decides to come to Kansas. And he had moments for Kansas. He had like a 2-week period where he was a star. But for the most part, he was still young, still developmental. He had all the pieces. But I actually thought kind of made sense for him to go back to college. Now, to be clear, I'm not in the business of telling people what they should and shouldn't do. Long ago, I stopped saying, this guy's making a mistake by leaving or coming back or returning or whatever. But what I will say about Johnny Furphy, thought stay at Kansas for another year. It's the NIL era. Develop. You're probably going to make 7 figures because if Coleman Hawkins is making $2 million, you're probably worth at least $1 million, if not more. So didn't love the decision to leave, but again, he's allowed to do what he wants. Falls to the second round. Him and Kyle Filipowski were the only players that were invited to the green room that did not get drafted in the first round. I bring it up because after all that, I do like where he landed. It's with the San Antonio Spurs. And we can talk about Popovich. We can criticize him, whatever. But Pop is a guy that really is a great developmental coach. And so I think that's a spot where I do think Furphy could develop and really kind of grow into his own. A couple other ones. Jalen Wells, Memphis Grizzlies. You know, fascinating story with this kid. Jalen Wells is a kid that started his career at D2 Sonoma State. And why I love that story, if you know the geography of California, Sonoma is wine country. Sonoma's out in the middle of nowhere. And so when this kid was in the portal, we talked about him. Like, I always kind of envisioned him as just playing like in one of those, like almost like a Field of Dreams, but for basketball, in a field of wine grapes or something like that. I just can't believe it. But he transfers to Washington State, blows up. When Washington State's coach leaves, he ends up both entering the portal and entering the draft. He ends up getting drafted by the Memphis Grizzlies. I think he's the type of player that can be really good. You know, we didn't talk honestly a ton about Zach Edey on Wednesday night. That pick was a little bit weird, and I'm only talking about it because Jalen Wells and Zach Edey were the 2 players drafted by Memphis. Well, there's another one coming up that we'll get into in a minute. The Zach Edey thing was a little bit weird to me. And I know anytime I say anything about Zach Edey, Torres just hates Zach Edey. No, I don't hate Zach Edey. But the Memphis Grizzlies are one of the few teams drafting in the top 10, top 12, top 15, whatever. They have an established star. They have a guy that they are building around in John Morant. What do they want to do with him? Speed, spacing. He's going to attack the rim. So I don't really get how Zach Edey fits into that equation. Thought they've actually done a good job of drafting to kind of build a roster around him. Jaren Jackson, Brandon Clark, whoever. They brought in Marcus Smart in free agency. So I thought the Zach Edey thing was weird, but I liked the Jalen Wells pick. And you know who else I liked, right? That's Cam Spencer from UConn, the 4th UConn player to be drafted in this draft. Goes 53 overall, just 2 spots before Bronny James. And listen, I really like the pick, but I'll also say this. I think we're starting to see something really, really, really special brewing at UConn, okay? And that's because you look at UConn. they've run through the last two national championships, but look at how they've done it and look at who they've done it with, okay? So remember, last year, they win the national championship. Top three players go to the NBA. Jordan Hawkins ends up as a lottery pick. Andre Jackson in the second round. Adama Sanogo undrafted, but ends up playing in a bunch of games for the Chicago Bulls this year. Now you have four guys drafted off this year's team. And so just from the two national championship teams, four players off last year's team, four of them have been drafted if you include Donovan Clingan, who was off the bench last year. You have a fifth from last year's team, Adama Sanogo, who has already played in the NBA. So you're going to have a minimum of five guys off that team who played in the NBA. And then on top of that, you have four drafted off the 2024 squad. Not to mention Alex Caravan will be drafted next year, a starter for both those teams. So I think you're looking at potentially, six guys off the 23 national championship team that are going to play in the NBA. Maybe seven if you include Samson Johnson if he someday gets there. You're going to have probably 5 or 6 off this past national championship team. And oh, by the way, there's more coming with Liam McNeely, the guys that are currently on the roster. And obviously, they are not slowing down anytime soon. Last little thought, and it's interesting because I see a lot of questions and comments in the YouTube chat right now. And I think you guys are thinking a lot of what I'm thinking, which is, how did Justin Edwards go undrafted? And so the Sports and Film Fellowship actually says something that I was thinking during the NBA draft. So Justin Edwards, for people who don't know, was in some recruiting services the number one high school player in the class of 2023. On top of that, at certain points, he was projected as the number one pick in this draft to start the season. Now, he had an up and down year. I thought by the end he was playing well. Now, it's interesting. He was probably one that was a little bit hurt by all the depth at Kentucky. And we've talked a lot about all the guys at Kentucky, but by the end of the year, they had really, what they have. They had 5 guards that could play if you include him. Reed Shepherd, Rob Dillingham, DJ Wagner, Antonio Reeves, and of course, oh, by the way, on top of that, Justin Edwards. And so I just bring it up because he was kind of a guy that kind of got lost in the shuffle. He had good games. He had bad games. I remember you go back to the Alabama game where Kentucky put up like 120 points and Justin Edwards ended up having a great game in that game. But he was up, he was down. But I'll be honest, I was stunned that this kid did not get drafted. By the way, he played well down the stretch. 4 of the last 5 games, he scored in double figures. Had 16 points against Tennessee in that season closing win, 28 in that game against Alabama. But Sports and Film Fellowship brings up a great point. He says, shame on Rich Paul for doing Justin Edwards like that. Embarrassing and shameful. Justin Edwards just deleted all of his posts on Instagram, and he's a clutch player. So think about that. Think about exactly what Sports, Film, and Fellowship just said, because I had the exact same thought. What was my thought? My thought was Rich Paul's been out there for the last 4 months, 3 months, whatever it is, touting Bronny James, doing interviews, doing non-interviews. He'll play here. He won't play here. You know who he did a huge disservice to? Justin Edwards, who should have been drafted on Wednesday or Thursday. I thought he'd go in the first round, late first round, but I thought he'd go in the first round. Goes undrafted. Shame on his agent, Rich Paul. I think it's a little bit embarrassing. The only other player I'm a little bit stunned did not get drafted. By the way, Justin Edwards, it could all work out pretty well because he just signed with his hometown team. He's from Philadelphia, and he is a player that is going to the Philadelphia 76ers. That's a kid. He's going to be undrafted, and I think you're going to look up in a year and be like, that dude's playing minutes for the Philadelphia 76ers. The other one, and I mentioned him earlier, Keyshawn Johnson, undrafted out of Arizona, 6'8", 6'9", can guard multiple positions, super athletic. I don't get him going undrafted, but you know what? He's another one that went to about as good of a situation as he possibly could have, because he ends up going to the Miami Heat. The Heat, by the way, also drafted Pelle Larsson, who played at Arizona. And so because of it, You have 2 Arizona players going to Miami. I think Pella Larson's going to be good there. I think Keyshawn Johnson is going to be really good there, and credit to them. All right, I think that's it for this show. Let me look through the notes really quick, see if we got any good questions. Just a couple. Stephen A. looked like he was asleep out there. Yeah, he did. And listen, that guy works hard, okay? One thing about me, I can disagree with your opinions or whatever, but if you're busting your butt, if you're on set every single day, I got to give credit where it's due. But at a certain point, you're on TV too much, okay, Stephen A.? This is probably why he's saying 20 million isn't enough for me. He got me on the NBA draft. He got me on the NFL draft. I'm on First Take. I'm on NBA Countdown. I was traveling for the finals. It's like, give the guy a day off. He's bringing nothing to the NBA draft conversation. It's okay to give him a day off. Nobody is tuning in to the NBA draft to hear what he says. Again, I'll say what I said to lead the show. Put on Fran Fraschilla. Put on Sean Farnham. Put on Jimmy Dykes. Put on Corey Alexander. Put on these guys that love college basketball, that know the stories, that know these players, that know the families, that know the histories. It makes too much sense. Speaking of which, Andrea and Malika are cringe. It's sad, says the Sports Film Festival and Fellowship. Soze says the LeBron hate has been passed down to Bronny. I actually disagree with that. I don't really think people hate Bronny. I think people are mad about LeBron controlling every move that the franchise makes. You look at how things are run. You look at how things are operated. His buddy got hired. His son gets drafted. His best friend is the most powerful agent in the sport, obviously. I think people are just tired of LeBron. I don't think people have like an anger towards Bronny. I think they have a frustration with LeBron. Big difference, something to think about. By the way, I guess Piper chimes in. Calipari questioned the same thing about Clutch. Listen, you can criticize Calipari for whatever. He sniffed out the Rich Paul Clutch stuff years ago. I was told 3-4 years ago he did not like those guys. By the way, I saw the Rich Paul comments about Calipari. That was, he basically said, well, I had last year Chris Livingston, and he was the 8th player in the school coming out of high school, and he goes undrafted, or he goes the last pick in the draft. Shame on Calipari. It's like, no, not shame on Calipari. Shame on you, man. Listen, the kid wasn't that good. Rich Paul and Cal have beef, probably. But Rich Paul did Justin Edwards absolutely zero favors over the course of the last few weeks. All right, I'll tell you what. I think it's time for me to get out of here. We got some other stuff going up on the YouTube channel. And as I said, by the way, we got an NBA, we got a presidential debate tonight. We won't get political. I promise. That's your business. I'm staying out of it. But I know some things are bigger than sports. And so because of it, whether you're watching or not, I don't know, but felt like I wanted to get this done before that debate. If you're not subscribed to the Aaron Torres Sports Podcast, please make sure to do so. Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Music, wherever you listen to podcasts, make sure to subscribe. Also, make sure to rate and review the show. Go ahead, give us a quick 5 stars. Let us know what you like, what you don't like, all that good stuff. Make sure you're following on social media at Aaron_Torres on Twitter, at Aaron Torres Pod on Instagram, Aaron Torres Podcast Questions at gmail.com. Aaron Torres Podcast Questions at gmail.com. That is all for today's show. So I'll be honest, don't know exactly when we'll be back. I have to do radio on Sunday and Monday, but we should be back probably Monday or Tuesday. Also, what we're going to do, we have a couple of the, what do we call them? The off-season grades pieces that we've been doing on the YouTube channel. They will run on the podcast feed probably on Sunday and Monday as well. We've done Kentucky. We've done Arkansas. So we'll start sharing those on the podcast feed as well. All for today's show. Appreciate your support. I'm going to get out of here. Shout out to Torrent Craig. Shout out to Rachel, who hates my voice. Shout out to JJ Redick, you F-head. Unblock me, bro. I'll be back soon. Monday. Aaron Torres.